Welcome to DeepDose.
Okay, let's start the deep dive.
Right. So today we're really digging into strategy and conflict.
Yeah, but not just in the, military history sense.
No, not at all. More like, well, how conflict is fundamental to getting anything done, anything valuable, anyway.
And the sources we're looking at are pretty intense on this point.
Definitely provocative. They push back hard against this modern idea that conflict is always bad, always something to be just avoided.
Right, it's just some relic of the past we should have moved beyond.
Exactly. But these texts argue, look, if you want success, whether that's in business or politics or even just maintaining your own integrity, sometimes even getting peace.
You had to be willing to engage in some kind of struggle.
You do. And strategically just understanding that grounds you, doesn't it? It puts you in touch with how things often actually work.
Because the sources seem to suggest that, well, aggressive forces often win out.
Often, yeah. Those who are willing to fight, to be decisive, to negotiate hard, they tend to shape the world around them. They get what they want more often than not.
Which implies that if you just try to avoid conflict altogether,
You become vulnerable. Yeah. You kind of become easy prey in a way. It makes vigilance almost mandatory.
there's that Friedrich Nietzsche quote that really hits hard on this.
Oh, yeah. Powerful stuff. He argued that without war, or let's say struggle, some kind of meaningful opposition,
You just sort of lounge around.
we wallow in comfort and ease, I think is the phrase. And it sounds nice, right? Comfort.
Who doesn't want comfort?
But Nietzsche's point was it doesn't lead to greatness. It leads to losing elevated thoughts and feelings.
We become cynical, even barbaric, he said.
Yeah. The struggle itself, the effort, the friction, that's what refines us. That's what builds character and purpose. When everything's easy, well, we lose the drive for the hard stuff, the meaningful stuff.
That feels very relevant today with, everything designed for maximum convenience, removing all the friction points.
It does, doesn't it? But if struggle is necessary, the question is, does it always have to be violent, destructive?
Good point. Is there another way?
Absolutely. And this is where the strategy gets really interesting. Think about nonviolence. Think about Gandhi.
Okay. His approach was obviously nonviolent physically.
Right. But was it non-conflict? No way. His goal was intensely strategic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Get the English out.
He wasn't just advocating for niceness. He wanted a massive political shift, a result.
Precisely. And the sources argue that his method to actually work needed way more thought, more planning, more discipline than traditional warfare.
Really. More than planning a battle.
Arguably, yes. Because executed correctly, nonviolence forces your opponent into a corner, morally, politically. They end up looking like the aggressors, the bullies. But it takes incredible organization and strategic thinking to pull that off. It's aimed squarely at results. A supreme form of strategic conflict, perhaps.
So our mission for this deep dive, then, is to pull out these core principles: strategy, psychological control, adaptation.
And see how they apply way beyond just battlefield.
Right. Extracting that kind of DNA of success, you could say, and seeing how it works in, well, everyday decisions, careers, achieving your goals.
Exactly. Moving from the battlefield to the boardroom to your own life. Okay, so where do we start with strategy? The sources are pretty clear. It starts inside. With you, the war against oneself.
That phrase, it sounds a bit dramatic, maybe? Like self-help talk.
It can sound that way, yeah. But the sources root it very firmly. Xenophon, the Greek soldier philosopher, he put it bluntly.
What did he say?
Something like rivers, mountains, other people. None of that really matters. The only obstacle is you.
Wow. Okay, so external challenges are secondary.
In a sense, the sources interpret this as meaning things like confusion, losing your sense of purpose, not even knowing who's on your side and who isn't. Those are the real killers. They're self-inflicted wounds.
If you're confused internally, you can't act effectively externally. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you, the commander of yourself, are divided, lost, unsure of the mission, failure is almost baked in, isn't it?
So how do you win that internal war? How do you get clarity?
Well, one powerful, maybe controversial idea from the sources is gaining clarity through opposition, through polarization.
Polarization, that sounds
Yeah.
aggressive. Like picking fights.
It can be, but strategically it's about definition. The idea is you often define who you are most clearly by knowing what you're against, what you absolutely don't want to be.
So you need an enemy, even if it's just a concept.
Yeah, an enemy to fight. And that could be anything, really. Procrastination in your own life, mediocrity in your team, a toxic culture, or yes, sometimes it is a direct competitor or opponent.
Why is that contrast so vital? Can't you just focus on your own positive goals?
You can try, but the argument is without that clear no, that distinct opposition, your identity and purpose can get mushy, vague,
Yeah.
easily influenced.
You get pulled in different directions, lost in those sterile debates the sources mention.
Exactly, where nothing gets decided because the core values aren't sharp. But if you know absolutely what you stand against, then figuring out what you stand for becomes much faster, much clearer. It defines your brand, so to speak, whether personal or organizational.
Okay, so you achieve internal clarity, maybe through defining yourself against something. What's next? Commitment.
Total commitment. And this leads to maybe the most dramatic strategic principle, burning the boats.
Ah, the Cortez story. Mexico, 1519.
Right. Hernan Cortez lands in Mexico. He's got maybe 500 guys. He's facing the Aztec Empire, hundreds of thousands strong. Hostile territory. Overwhelming odds.
And his men weren't exactly full of confidence, were they?
No. They were thinking about the gold, sure, the women maybe. But mostly they were glancing back at the ships. The way home.
The escape hatch. The safe plan B, back to Cuba.
That was it, that safety net, those ships sitting there in the harbor. Cortez realized that was the real enemy, not the Aztecs, but the option to retreat.
Because it divided their focus, their commitment.
Totally. As long as escape was possible, they wouldn't be desperate enough. They wouldn't give 110% to the impossible task ahead. So, he got rid of the option.
He burned the boats. Literally.
He did, scuttled the fleet, made it absolutely clear. The only way out now is forward. Success or death right here.
That sounds incredibly risky, though. Isn't having options, managing risk, part of good strategy?
It's a brilliant question, and it's the difference between being reckless and being strategically committed. Cortez wasn't just being impulsive, it was a calculated psychological move.
Forcing the situation.
Exactly, forcing desperation, forcing total investment from everyone. The principle applies broadly. If you have that comfy safety net, the backup job, the wealthy relative you can always rely on, it can actually stop you from fully committing to the struggle you need to win right now. Sometimes you have to metaphorically burn your own boats. High stakes often drive high performance.
And this idea of extreme pressure transforming someone. The Dostoevsky example is chilling.
Oh, absolutely. Fyodor Dostoevsky. He got caught up with some radical intellectuals in Russia, arrested, sentenced to death by firing squad in 1849.
And this wasn't just a threat, right? They actually took him out to be shot.
They did, the whole ritual. Dressed him in a shroud, lined him up. He was minutes, maybe seconds from death. He experienced that certainty of annihilation, that ultimate place of death scenario.
I can't even imagine the psychological pressure.
Right. Then, last possible second, a messenger rides up. Sentence commuted, hard labor in Siberia instead.
Which is horrific, but not death.
Exactly. And that experience, that brought me with absolute finality, it completely rewired him. He called it a new birth. Before that, he felt he was kind of drifting, a creative vagabond.
And after?
After seeing death that close, surviving, he wrote like a man possessed. During and after Siberia, produced his masterpieces like Crime and Punishment, that intense focus, that clarity of purpose. It came directly from facing mortality without any safety net, a massive surge of focused energy.
That intense focus, born from desperation. Wow. It connects to the last part of this internal war, just facing fear itself. General Patton seems key here.
George S. Patton. Yeah, a fascinating figure. Obsessed with courage, came from a military family terrified of being a coward, of shaming the name.
He put on this incredibly brave, tough exterior his whole life.
All bravado, but deep down he was plagued by this fear of freezing up in actual combat.
And then, his first real battle, 1918, leading tanks. It happened.
It did. He described it later. He was physically paralyzed, couldn't move. His mind was yelling at him, die standing up. But his body just wouldn't respond. Frozen solid by fear.
So what's the lesson there? That even Patton was scared.
More than that, the lesson isn't about becoming fearless. Nobody is truly fearless. It's about gaining command over your fear.
How do you do that?
Exposure. Fear loves the unknown, the imagined threat. The only way to really get a grip on it, to build real confidence, is to face the things you fear, repeatedly. Delicate situations, conflicts, confrontations, you have to actively seek them out in controlled ways to sort of break in your spirit, like training a horse. Make it accustomed to the noise and chaos of battle.
Okay, so winning the internal war is about commitment and mastering fear. But then you turn outward. And the sources say a huge enemy isn't always the opponent, but your own rigid thinking, getting stuck in the past.
Absolutely. And the classic disastrous example is the Prussian army facing Napoleon in 1806. Prussia had this incredible military reputation built by Frederick the Great decades earlier.
They were basically resting on their laurels.
Totally. Their generals in 1806, guys like Hohenlohe, they were completely blinded by nostalgia. They were fighting the last war mentally.
Still using Frederick's tactics, like the famous oblique attack.
Exactly. They kept debating plans that were just minor tweaks on Frederick's old playbook. Tactics designed for a slower, more predictable era, and they willfully ignored the intelligence coming in.
What did the intelligence say?
Recon reports were clear. The French army under Napoleon was operating completely differently. Fast-moving divisions, carrying their own provisions, not tied to slow supply lines, unprecedented speed and mobility.
So Napoleon had adapted, decentralized, while the Prussians were still thinking in terms of one big, slow-moving, perfectly ordered machine.
They were obsessed with theory, with their perfectly drawn diagrams of Frederick's battles. They couldn't adapt to the messy reality Napoleon presented. And the result?
Catastrophe. Jen Auersted. Utter defeat.
Because they were intellectually fossilized. They couldn't let go of past glory to see the present threat clearly.
This gap between the neat plan and the messy reality. That's where Clausewitz comes in, right? With his idea of friction.
Friction, yes.
Yes.
Probably one of the single most important strategic concepts ever articulated. Essential for anyone making decisions, really.
So what is friction exactly?
It's everything that goes wrong between the plan on paper and what actually happens on the ground. It's the unexpected stuff.
Can you give an example outside of war?
Oh, sure. Think about launching a big new product. Your plan is perfect. Timelines, budgets, marketing, all lined up. Friction is. The key supplier's factory has a fire. Your lead developer gets sick. A competitor launches something similar unexpectedly. The market sentiment shifts overnight. It's the fog, the noise, the delays, the simple human errors, the sheer bad luck.
All the unpredictable stuff that messes up the perfect plan.
Exactly. And Clausewitz's point is, friction isn't an anomaly. It's inevitable. It's inherent in any complex undertaking.
So if friction is guaranteed, then being rigid is basically strategic suicide.
Precisely. If your plan is too brittle, too dependent on everything going perfectly, friction will shatter it. Therefore, real strategy isn't about blindly sticking to the plan. It's about constant adaptation.
Like Ulysses S. Grant said.
Yeah, Grant knew chaos. He said something like, anyone who tries to make war by slavishly following rules will fail. War renews itself constantly. You have to adapt or die.
If war, or maybe any complex situation, renews itself constantly, the sources suggest the strategist needs a kind of childlike spirit. That sounds odd.
It does, doesn't it? But think about it. What are kids often like? Curious, excited by the now. They forget yesterday's failures pretty quickly.
Okay, I see that. They're not burdened by the past in the same way.
Exactly. Aristotle said life is movement, what doesn't move is dead. Those Prussian generals were paralyzed by the memory of Frederick's greatness. A great strategist needs that mental freedom, that ability to see the current situation fresh, without baggage. They need to be able to pivot, to force themselves to look differently when one idea gets stuck.
So that freedom allows for real flexibility when things go wrong, when a tactic isn't working.
Total flexibility. Look at Aesop's fable of the bat, caught between the warring birds and beasts. How does it survive?
It changes its story, right? Tells the birds, I'm one of you, I have wings. Then tells the beast, no, I'm a mammal like you.
Exactly. It saves itself by transforming its identity based on the immediate threat. That ability to shift, to adapt who you are and what you're doing based on circumstances. That's the key to escape and survival sometimes.
And this isn't just philosophy. Masters of strategy, like Musashi or Mao, said the same thing, didn't they?
Directly. Miyamoto Musashi, the swordsman. He wrote that if your first attack is blocked, if nothing's working, you have to immediately ditch your first idea, change everything, find a new rhythm. Don't double down on failure.
And now?
Even more blunt. When one fights, one does not take books along. Dogma, theory, the right way to do things. It's useless if it's not working right now. You have to be willing to throw out the plan, burn the tactical boats, you might say, when reality demands it.
Okay, so agility helps you win the immediate fight. But the sources stress something bigger. Grand strategy, looking beyond the battle to the long game.
Yes, this is crucial. It's about connecting your actions, your battles, to the ultimate political or organizational goal. Clausewitz nailed it again, didn't he?
War is the continuation of politics by other means.
That's the one. It means military action is never an end in itself. It has to serve a purpose. And if you make a big mistake in war, Clausewitz argued, it's almost always because the politics were wrong. The goal was unrealistic, maybe, or the means didn't match the end.
So grand strategy is about seeing that bigger picture, thinking about the long-term consequences.
Exactly. Not just winning the next hill, but understanding how winning that hill contributes to winning the war, or achieving the peace, or reaching the market share you want. It's the summit of rational strategic thinking.
And the classic example of shifting from just tactics to grand strategy is Scipio Africanus against Hannibal.
Oh, a brilliant case study. We're back around 218 BC. Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, is running circles around the Romans in Italy. He's a tactical genius. Inflicted devastating defeats like Cannae. Rome is terrified.
They keep trying to fight him head-on in Italy, and they keep losing badly.
Right. Scipio comes along and realizes, look, fighting Hannibal on his terms, where he's strongest, is a losing game. We need to change the game entirely.
He had to look beyond the immediate threat, Hannibal in Italy, to the root cause.
Precisely. He identified the real problem wasn't just Hannibal the general, it was Carthage itself. The state, the power base, the source of Hannibal's funding and reinforcements.
So instead of defending Italy,
He did the completely unexpected. He bypassed Hannibal and invaded North Africa, took the war directly to Carthage's doorstep.
a classic indirect approach, genius.
Absolutely, because what did it do? It forced Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy. He had to abandon his incredibly successful campaign to come home and defend the capital.
Which pulled Hannibal out of his element and onto Scipio's chosen ground.
Exactly. Scipio then defeats him decisively at the Battle of Zama. And notice the outcome. Scipio didn't just win a battle, he won the war. He destroyed Rome's greatest rival. He achieved the grand strategic objective by targeting Carthage's political center of gravity, not just Hannibal's army.
That focus on the ultimate goal and achieving it efficiently links to the strategy of economy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Contrasting Scipio with Pyrrhus.
Yes, King Pyrrhus. He won battles against Rome, famously so, but the cost was devastating. He lost so many men and resources.
So we get the phrase Pyrrhic victory, a win that costs so much it's basically a loss.
Exactly. He bankrupted himself winning battles that didn't achieve the strategic goal. Now contrast that with someone like Queen Elizabeth I of England.
Facing the Spanish Empire under Philip II, much bigger, much richer.
Vastly richer. Elizabeth knew England couldn't afford a direct, full-scale war with Spain. It would ruin the country, even if they won some battles. So her grand strategy was economic.
Ruin Spain without ruining England.
Indirectly. She focused on Spain's financial weak point, the treasure fleets coming from the New World, Philip's entire economy, his ability to wage war, his credit. It all depended on that gold and silver getting through safely.
So Elizabeth didn't need a massive standing army right away.
No. She built up her navy, yes, but quietly. Crucially, she invested heavily in intelligence, the best network in Europe at the time. This let her know exactly what Spain was planning.
So she could wait. Avoid costly mobilization until the last possible moment.
So precisely. Saved huge amounts of money. And meanwhile, she used deniable assets, privateers, pirates like Drake, to constantly harass the Spanish treasure fleets. Didn't cost the English crown much, but it created massive uncertainty for Spain. It choked Philip's credit, caused financial panic.
She was waging economic warfare, essentially bleeding Spain dry indirectly before the Armada even set sail.
That's it. Smart, economical, grand strategy. Spending pennies to cost the enemy pounds, or rather, doubloons.
Now, shifting from geopolitics to maybe manipulating individuals, the sources talk about visceral communication. Using actions, not just words. Alfred Hitchcock comes up here.
Hitchcock, master of psychological manipulation on and off screen. The example is from directing the 39 Steps.
What was the scene?
He needed his two stars, Robert Donat and Madeleine Carroll, to play characters who are strangers but suddenly find themselves handcuffed together. They need to convey awkwardness, frustration, forced intimacy.
Okay, so normally a director would give them notes. Act more annoyed, look uncomfortable.
Right, abstract instructions, which often leads to, well, acting. It can look artificial. Hitchcock wanted the real thing, the genuine feeling.
So what did he do? His strategy.
He didn't just talk. He took the prop handcuffs and actually locked his two lead actors together for hours, some say for a whole day.
No way. Really?
Yes, they had to do everything together, walk around the set, eat lunch, probably even figure out bathroom breaks. Imagine the sheer awkwardness and irritation.
So they weren't acting frustrated anymore. They were frustrated and embarrassed and annoyed.
Exactly. They were feeling the scene's emotions viscerally, physically. So when the cameras rolled, that genuine, spontaneous awkwardness and tension just poured out naturally. No acting required.
That's brilliant. It's strategy applied to directing. Bypass the intellect, create the emotional reality.
It's pure strategic thinking. Instead of relying on words, on persuasion, he engineered the conditions that would produce the behavior he wanted. That's visceral communication. Powerful stuff, whether you're directing actors or trying to influence anyone's behavior. And that idea of bypassing logic to hit emotion leads straight into psychological warfare, doesn't it? Controlling the story, the narrative. Often, that's where conflicts are really won or lost.
Especially in politics. Margaret Thatcher's 1979 election win is a fascinating example. She seemed to break all the rules.
She really did. At the time, the conventional wisdom in British politics was play it safe, appeal to the center ground, don't rock the boat too much.
But Thatcher went completely the other way. Super aggressive rhetoric.
Totally. She called the election a crusade against socialism. Really harsh, polarizing language. Pundits thought she was alienating too many people, that she could never win like that.
But the sources argue that polarization was exactly her strategy. It wasn't a mistake.
No, it seems deliberate. Her harsh rhetoric and the strong reaction it provoked from labor, it basically forced people to pay attention. It shattered the apathy.
It created a clear choice, left versus right. No more mushy middle.
Exactly. It created this big, clear divide. And by doing that, she forced all those undecided, maybe uninterested voters in the middle to actually pick a side. Her gamble was that enough of them would break her way, and they did. She won by creating the confrontation, by forcing clarity through polarization.
Now, that kind of outright attack being the aggressor,
Yeah.
it can backfire today, can't it? Especially with social media. Intense scrutiny.
Oh, absolutely. Being seen as the bully, the aggressor, can be incredibly damaging. The political correctness landscape, as the sources might frame it, makes direct offense costly.
So what's the strategic alternative if you need to be aggressive but can't afford the backlash?
The counterattack. It's about maneuvering your opponent into throwing the first punch.
So you can play the victim, or at least the reasonable one reacting to aggression.
Precisely. You maintain the moral high ground, or at least the appearance of it, while still hitting back hard. You lure them into looking unreasonable, overly aggressive.
The 1932 U.S. election, Roosevelt versus Hoover, seems like a perfect case.
Textbook example. Hoover was the incumbent president, desperate, facing the Great Depression. He went on the attack hard, started calling Roosevelt a socialist, a radical. Really toxic stuff back then.
And how did Roosevelt respond? Did he sling mud back?
No, that was the key. He stayed calm. He toured the country, talked about confidence, recovery, practical solutions. He projected calm competence. He refused to get drawn into Hoover's negativity.
Which made Hoover look
Desperate, angry, maybe even unhinged. Roosevelt's calm was like a mirror reflecting Hoover's aggression back at him, magnified. Hoover basically defeated himself with his own negativity. Roosevelt won massively, not just politically, but morally too. It's a vital strategy when firing the first shot is just too risky.
This idea of controlling perception, it also applies to just protecting yourself,
Right?
deterring attack, the illusion of weakness idea, or maybe strength.
Yeah, creating a perception to discourage potential attackers. You don't necessarily have to be overwhelmingly strong, but you need to project the willingness and ability to retaliate. Make yourself look like more trouble than you're worth.
Like the porcupine image the sources used.
Exactly. The porcupine isn't the biggest or toughest animal, but those quills make predators think twice. Is it really worth the pain to attack this thing? You want potential aggressors to look for easier prey.
So you don't need overwhelming force, just a credible deterrent, a symbolic show of strength.
Sometimes, yeah. Just showing you'll fight back, even if you might lose, can be enough. Throwing one punch back, symbolically, it changes the attacker's calculation.
In Stonewall Jackson's Valley campaign during the U.S. Civil War, that's presented as a masterclass in this kind of psychological bluff.
Incredible campaign. Jackson had very few troops, maybe 3,600 initially. He was massively outnumbered by the Union force.
A direct confrontation with suicide.
Pretty much. But at Kernstown, he launched this incredibly audacious, arguably reckless attack against a much larger Union force. He actually lost the battle tactically.
But the way he fought, the speed and aggression he showed afterwards, moving his small force rapidly around the valley.
That's what mattered strategically. It completely baffled the Union high command, particularly President Lincoln back in Washington.
They couldn't believe anyone would be so aggressive with so few men.
Exactly. They concluded Jackson must have huge hidden reserves, massive reinforcements. Why else would he risk it? They bought the bluff entirely.
And the consequence of that misperception.
It was huge. Lincoln got spooked. He held back McClellan's main offensive against the Confederate capital, Richmond. He diverted tens of thousands of Union troops to the Shenandoah Valley to hunt down Jackson's Phantom Army.
So Jackson, despite being outnumbered and losing battles, achieved a massive strategic victory.
Absolutely. He paralyzed the main enemy offensive, tied down huge numbers of enemy troops, all through psychological warfare. By creating a powerful, false narrative of strength, he completely altered the strategic landscape without needing a major battlefield win. Perception became reality.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual mindset, adapting tactics.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the organization itself, how structure impacts strategy.
Yeah.
And the sources draw a sharp contrast.
Yeah.
Centralized control versus decentralized agility.
Yeah, and the collision between Napoleon and the Austrian general Mack in 1805 at Ulm is the perfect illustration. Mack was, well, the ultimate control freak.
He loved order, predictability, everything neat and tidy.
Totally. He saw his army as this intricate machine. Every part had to move exactly as planned, directed from the center. He couldn't handle chaos, ambiguity, the unexpected.
He needed total information, total control.
And Napoleon knew this. He understood Mack's psychology. Mack thought he had Napoleon trapped near Ulm, concentrating his own forces, expecting a nice, predictable frontal assault.
But Napoleon didn't play by those rules.
Not at all. Napoleon deliberately sowed confusion. How? By breaking his army down into smaller, self-sufficient corps, each led by a marshal.
And these corps moved independently.
Fast.
Very fast.
Yeah.
And crucially, Napoleon didn't give his marshals ridiculously detailed orders for every little thing. He didn't use what the Germans later called Besa, or command by specific instruction.
He used something else.
Yes, Auftragstaktik, mission command. This is absolutely key.
Okay, what's the difference? Befehl versus Auftragstaktik. Befehl is do exactly this, at this time, in this way. Micromanagement. Auftragstaktik is here is the overall goal, the mission. You figure out the best way to achieve it based on what you see on the ground. I trust your judgment.
So it gives subordinate commanders freedom, initiative.
Complete freedom within the mission's intent. It allows for speed, flexibility, exploiting opportunities instantly without waiting for orders from HQ. Napoleon's corps could spread out, confuse Mack with sightings all over the place, move rapidly around his flanks, and then converge quickly for the final blow.
While Mack, needing perfect order and information,
Was completely paralyzed by the speed and apparent chaos. He couldn't process it. His need for centralized control became his downfall. His entire army surrendered without a major battle.
wow. So Napoleon's organizational structure itself was a weapon.
Absolutely. And its effectiveness was so obvious that the Prussian-German army later adopted Auftragstaktik as their core doctrine for generations. They learned from Napoleon's success judge officers on results, on achieving the mission, not on slavishly following a detailed plan. It fosters initiative and adaptability, which you absolutely need to deal with Clausewitz's friction.
And this isn't just military. George C. Marshall applied similar thinking to bureaucracy during World War II, right? Focused on information flow.
Yes, George C. Marshall, U.S. Army Chief of Staff, he faced an organizational nightmare running a global war effort from Washington. He realized a huge bottleneck was simply information overload at the top.
Too many reports. Too much noise.
Way too much. He said he was getting direct reports from something like 60 different subordinates. 60. Imagine trying to read and act on all that daily. Impossible.
So what did he do? How did he streamline it?
Ruthlessly. First, he drastically cut the number of people reporting directly to him, down from 60 to just 6.
60 down to 6. That's
Yeah.
massive.
Revolutionary. He put trusted people in key positions, protégés who understood his thinking, his style, and then he laid down the law about communication.
What were the rules?
Absolute clarity, absolute conciseness, get to the point immediately, no waffle. If a report was too long, too vague, didn't clearly state the problem and a recommended action, he just wouldn't read it. Ignored it.
Tough, but effective.
Incredibly. It forced everyone down the chain to think clearly, to filter out the noise, to only send up what truly mattered, the result. He estimated it quadrupled the speed of information flow and decision-making within the entire War Department. He decentralized the information processing in a way.
Okay, but what if you're facing an opponent who is just overwhelmingly stronger? Better organized, more resources, direct confrontation, even decentralized, might be suicide.
And you have to disappear, become invisible, use unconventional tactics.
Exactly. That's the realm of guerrilla warfare, using time and space as your main weapons, avoiding direct fights.
Mao Zedong's Long March comes up again here, often seen as just a desperate retreat. And it was desperate, no doubt. A brutal fighting retreat from Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists deep into the remote Chinese interior. Thousands died.
But the sources argue it was also strategically necessary, not just a flight.
Yes, because survival was the primary strategic goal at that point. The march achieved that. But it also did something else. It acted as a brutal filter.
And so it have filter.
The sheer hardship, the mountains, the swamps, the starvation, the constant battles, it weeded out the uncommitted, the lukewarm, the ones who weren't truly dedicated to the cause.
So the survivors were a hardened, ideologically pure core.
Precisely. The Long March forged the leadership and the committed veterans who would eventually win the revolution years later. Mao traded space and immediate comfort for time and the consolidation of a fanatically loyal base. Strategic survival and purification through retreat.
Lawrence of Arabia used similar ideas, didn't he? Leveraging the environment against the Turks.
Very similar principles. The Ottoman Turks wanted a conventional war in the Middle East. Clear front lines, decisive battles. Lawrence, advising the Arab revolt, refused to give them that.
He used the desert itself as a weapon.
Absolutely. The vast, harsh, difficult terrain. He avoided big battles where the Turks' superior firepower would dominate. Instead, he led small, fast-moving Arab forces on raids, hit-and-run attacks.
Targeting vulnerable points, like the Hejaz Railway.
Exactly. Blow up a section of track, ambush a supply column, then melt back into the desert before the Turks could react effectively.
And he deliberately played on the enemy's conventional mindset, their desire for a decisive fight.
Yes, he'd lure them out, make them chase his forces deeper and deeper into the punishing desert. They'd get exhausted, sick, run low on water and supplies. The desert did half the fighting for him. He used the environment and the enemy's own aggression against them.
The sources use the metaphor of the mosquito for this kind of warfare.
It's a great image, isn't it? A conventional army is like a large animal. It has a head, flanks, a rear, clear targets. You can see it, hit it.
But the guerrilla, the mosquito.
It's elusive, annoying. You hear the buzzing, you feel the bites, but you can't easily find it or crush it. It doesn't present a clear target. It just keeps harassing, draining your energy, your resources, your morale bit by bit. No vulnerable form to strike.
So invisibility can mean avoiding direct contact? But what about attacking from the inside? Internal sabotage, the interior front.
Now, that's a really complex and morally gray area of strategy. The prime example given is Admiral Wilhelm Canaris.
Head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence during World War II.
Right. An old-school German aristocrat, fundamentally anti-Nazi, but running Hitler's spy agency. An incredible paradox.
He couldn't openly oppose Hitler, obviously. That would be suicide.
No. So according to the sources, he chose internal sabotage. He used his position to subtly undermine the German war effort from within.
How? What did he do specifically?
He played on Hitler's known psychological weaknesses. Hitler was impatient. He craved quick, decisive, glorious victories. He hated long, drawn-out campaigns.
So Canaris fed him information that reinforced those biases.
Allegedly, yes. For instance, when Hitler was contemplating invading Britain, Operation Sea Lion, Canaris's Abwehr provided intelligence reports that deliberately exaggerated British defenses, RAF strength, public morale, made the whole thing look much tougher, much riskier, much more time-consuming than it might have been.
Making it seem less appealing to Hitler's desire for a quick win.
Exactly. He apparently did similar things regarding a potential attack on Gibraltar. By making these difficult but potentially war-winning operations seem too difficult, too costly, he helped steer Hitler away from them, saved Britain and the Allied cause perhaps through disinformation directed at his own leader.
That's incredible. The ultimate insider attack.
It fits the principle.
Yeah.
If the enemy fortress looks too strong from the outside, don't batter your head against the walls. Find a way inside. Attack the internal structure, the leadership's psychology. Exploit their biases, their paranoia. Open that interior front.
This leads us to the final and perhaps darkest strategic concept, the use of terror. The sources analyze this not morally, but purely for its strategic function.
Right. And strategically defined, terrorism isn't primarily about the physical damage caused by an act of violence. That's often secondary.
The main goal is the psychological impact.
Exactly. It's violence designed to create fear, panic, chaos, and political division, far exceeding the actual physical destruction. It's historically been the weapon of the weak against the strong, the few against the many.
Using symbolic acts of extreme violence, like the historical assassins, the Nizari Ismailis under Hassani Saba.
They're a classic example. Small group using targeted assassinations of powerful figures to create widespread fear and political instability across the Middle East. The goal wasn't military conquest, it was psychological disruption, undermining confidence in the rulers, sowing chaos.
And the sources argue that modern terrorism, particularly something like 9/11, represents kind of qualitative leap, a new level of virulence.
Yes, and the reason given is global interconnectedness.
How does that change things?
In the past, a terror attack might cause panic in a city, maybe a region. But today, because everything is linked, finance, media, travel, communication, an attack on one critical node.
Like the World Trade Center, a global financial hub.
It triggers an almost instantaneous chain reaction around the entire world. Financial markets plunge globally, air travel shuts down, security measures tighten everywhere, political debates ignite, mistrust flares up. The psychological and economic shockwaves are immediate and global.
So the impact over time, the downstream consequences, are vastly amplified compared to the physical damage.
That's the argument. The success of a terror strategy isn't measured in casualties alone, but in its ability to start and sustain that chain reaction, to disrupt the status quo, to polarize societies, to force costly overreactions from the state. The goal is to provoke a response that ultimately damages the target more than the initial attack did.
If the main weapon is psychological disruption, then the defense must also be psychological.
It has to be. The only truly effective counter-strategy, according to this analysis, is to break that psychological chain reaction at the source.
How do leaders do that? What's required?
Absolute stability, unwavering resolve, refusing to panic or to be seen panicking. Critically, channeling the inevitable public emotions, fear, anger, away from division and towards unity and resilience.
The examples given are leaders like Churchill during the Blitz or de Gaulle during the OAS terror campaign in France in 1961.
Right. Both faced intense terror campaigns aimed at breaking public morale and forcing political concessions. Churchill famously walked the bombed streets of London, broadcasting defiance, making it clear Britain would never yield. He rallied the people, made them participants in the resistance.
And de Gaulle facing assassination attempts and bombings aimed at stopping Algerian independence.
He went on television, projected absolute calm and authority. He essentially dismissed the terrorists as a desperate, irrelevant minority compared to the will of France. He refused to let them dictate the political agenda through fear. Both leaders absorbed the shock, refused to be psychologically defeated, and used the attacks as a rallying point to strengthen national unity, not weaken it. They stopped the panic from spiraling. #outro.
So, wrapping this all up, this deep dive seems to constantly circle back to one core idea. Real strategic mastery is about objective, rational thinking, seeing the big picture, the long game.
The summit of rationality, as one source puts it. And maybe the hardest part isn't figuring out the complex external situation, but mastering our own internal reactions.
Resisting that powerful instinct to just react emotionally, to lash out or panic or cling to familiar ideas when things get tough.
Exactly. In a world that feels increasingly driven by instant emotional responses, by social media outrage, by short-term thinking, maintaining that cool, objective, long-view strategic mindset gives you a tremendous advantage in almost any field.
Okay, that feels like the central takeaway. Which leaves us with the final provocative thought the sources offer. It's about innovation.
Right. Strategy demands innovation. You have to be unconventional, surprising, maybe even shocking to break through, to win.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. The catch is that innovation itself follows the laws of fashion.
How so? Like artistic movements.
Precisely. Think about Marcel Duchamp submitting a urinal fountain to an art exhibition in 1917. Utterly shocking. Scandalous. The height of the avant-garde. Redefined art.
But what happens to the avant-garde eventually?
It gets understood, it gets copied, it gets imitated poorly, it becomes mainstream, then it becomes a standard technique, and finally, it becomes a boring cliche. The shocking becomes commonplace.
So the brilliant, unconventional strategy that won you your last victory
is the very strategy your competitors are now studying, analyzing, and preparing to counter. Your innovation inevitably becomes the new orthodoxy, the thing the next innovator needs to overthrow.
Meaning there's no single perfect strategy that lasts forever.
Seems not. The path to sustained success isn't about finding one magic formula. It's about the relentless, continuous pursuit of novelty and transformation. Always adapting, always moving, always changing. Before your greatest success becomes the blueprint for your next failure, keep moving.